And welcome into the Monday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Joe Rexrode, how we doing? What's going on?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Doing good. Nick, how we doing? How's life?
Good. Can't complain. Good weekend. Busy weekend. Scary weekend also.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about that. We got a lot to get into on the program here today. We will remember the life and legacy of Frank Wycheck, Titans legend, on the program here today. We'll be joined by Teresa Walker coming up at 6:30 with her perspective. Obviously covered Frank Wycheck for a long time with the Tennessee Titans. We'll be discussing Frank's career, Frank's life throughout the show today. We welcome your thoughts on that as well. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025, our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joe, you had that happen this weekend, which we'll get into here in just a few minutes. You had tornadoes come through our area. I'm sitting there Saturday. You know, I live kind of in the Goodlettsville / Ridgetop area around here, which was basically right in the center of a tornado ripping through Springfield and a tornado ripping through Madison and Hendersonville. I was kind of like right in the middle of all of that, and fortunately didn't have much going on at my house. It was kind of spared that way, but wild Saturday night in our area, a tragic Saturday in our area between tornadoes in Clarksville that unfortunately have taken some lives, also in Madison, and then some damage in Hendersonville and in Springfield as well. Just a really tough weekend for our area here in Middle Tennessee. And, Joe, it's not the first time we've had to get on here and talk about tornadoes and tornado damage, but a rough weekend for Middle Tennessee with some of the damage that went through Springfield and Hendersonville and Madison and Clarksville, and just a lot of devastation in our area this weekend.
Yeah, terrible stuff, terrifying, tragic, as you said. I believe last I saw 6 deaths, and I hope there's no update on that. You know, and obviously many injured, and some of the damage is just unbelievable. Some of the videos. I think is it 13, I believe, is the last I saw officially, the calculations after the fact that 13 different tornadoes touched down. EF3 is the one that hit Clarksville, which I'm not going to tell you that I can exactly explain that to you, but that means it's a pretty big deal. And it's just, it felt so kind of out of nowhere. You know, which I know that's how it goes a lot of times with this stuff. But sometimes there's maybe a little bit of a, you know, an expectation that could happen. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, for like Saturday morning into Saturday afternoon, you know, it was like, yeah, there's gonna be a few thunderstorms, right? And that stuff just, the conditions were right. And I was watching one of the local newscasts, and I honestly I don't remember which one. I was kind of flipping around, but you know, they put the camera on Broadway, and as at that point, you know, we weren't sure it was possibly going to go a little more south and clip, you know, downtown.
Right.
And basically they were pleading with these people, like, you have to go find cover right now, you know, a few minutes away from this thing coming through. But just a sad and tragic and terrifying day.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I grew up in the Hendersonville area, so seeing some of the photos yesterday of kind of daylight coming up, it's been wild to see. I mean, fortunately, you know, my family and everything is okay. I've got my grandparents staying with me. They're at the house right now because all their power is gone. And you know, my other set of grandparents were at a Christmas musical at their church on Sunday night, and the tornado actually hit their church while they were there. Now they got a pretty big building, and pretty big church, so I think it was, you know, everybody was fine there, but it kind of clipped through, you know, Bluegrass Country Club up there in Hendersonville and kind of went over by the YMCA and by First Baptist Church where they went. So it was a wild weekend trying to, like, you know, get a hold of them and figure out if everybody was okay, and then, you know, the power situation, just crazy. And then some of the photos, you know, a couple of people put some drones in the air yesterday, and just some of the damage that I saw in Springfield, which is where my parents live, and then in Hendersonville, where I've got a lot of friends and family. Just, it was rough to see yesterday. A lot of places that, you know, I'm familiar with, and places that I've been, you know, big play in Hendersonville, which we've done some things with here on our station. They had just kind of remodeled things and opened things up. I think like a couple of months ago, they went through this big remodel, and then they just got absolutely slammed by the tornado over the weekend. So some tough images to see coming out of Hendersonville.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm looking at Andy Humbles from the Tennessean has pictures of big play, and it's just and I mean some of these pictures and some of the videos of it's just you don't really understand. I mean, I've never been within like in a situation where I could like video a tornado, but like the power of those things, it really is, it's unbelievable. And some of the aerial footage where you can kind of see the path, and also it just makes dust of everything. It's just it's really scary. So there's obviously a lot of blood is needed. That's one thing, supplies and all that stuff too. So at this point, and obviously this community, as last time, as with everything, we'll rally and support. We know that'll happen. But there's a lot of different ways people can help.
Yep. And as those become more available throughout the week, and there's, kind of an ability to step back and to observe, what we need and what supplies are needed, all those things, we'll pass that information along as best we can as that information becomes more and more available. But like you said, Joe, I mean, it made me think back to March of 2020, right before, the pandemic hit, and there was the tornado that kind of ripped through East Nashville and around this area here, and we were actually kind of on the air. We're getting on the air that day right as the sun was coming up, as the damage was starting to be kind of identified there in March of 2020. And I'll never forget that show. I mean, we were just basically discovering new things with the sun coming up as to the scope of the damage and how widespread it was, and it was not good. That was a memorable show for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and there were some areas there that were hit that, the path was a little bit similar in some ways.
Yeah.
Once it went north. So, but yeah, that was almost like a breaking news, update show for 4 hours that day. I had forgotten that. You're right. It was right before the pandemic, wasn't it?
Yep. I got a texter that says, I live in Clarksville, and if a tornado jumped one street over, then my house would have been completely gone. It's by the grace of God that I'm still here. Yeah, that's the other thing, Joe. Like, I watched this video of kind of a drone shot in Springfield, and it's wild, like, what gets hit and what doesn't in some of these things that are, like, really close in proximity to each other. And I'm not smart enough to explain, like, how that is. I mean, I guess the thing's just, dropping down and pulling up. I don't know what all goes into it, but some of the things that get hit and some of the things that don't, it's wild to see when you see, like, the aerial path of the remnants of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the direct hit is complete obliteration,
right?
But then it can be a few feet away and be fine. It's, I mean, some of the videos too of, like, I assume it was like a generator or something like that sort of exploded in the middle of the thing.
Yeah, looked like I think a substation, like a power substation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just, and I mean, I you tell me. I mean, I can't imagine there have been too many of these in December. I know the one we were talking about was in March, but it just doesn't seem like the time for that to happen.
It doesn't. I mean, I was listening. I was watching the News Channel 5 broadcast, and Leland Statham was on there talking about how they've seen tornadoes around here in every month of the calendar year, which is kind of wild to think about when you think about, like, tornadoes in January, which we've had here before. I mean, the winter months you would think are times where these things don't really happen. But I will say, not that I'm like some meteorologist or anything, but Heather and I were walking around, like, Saturday morning / early Saturday afternoon. And I was like, man, it's like stuffy out here, right? Like, it was humid. And, I didn't know that it was going to turn into that later. But after the storms went through, I did remember talking with my wife about, man, it was really stuffy and humid throughout the day, which you don't see a whole lot in the middle of December.
Yeah. And obviously, of course, it's a cold front in and way colder
Oh yeah.
afterward. Scotty from Dixon says he was coaching a youth football travel tournament, Pope John Prep School in Hendersonville.
Man.
Hid the teams inside the bathrooms and gym. One came through Vietnam's Veteran Boulevard, and my parents had a pick. Thankfully, no one was hurt at our event. I'm glad no one was hurt, Scotty.
Yeah, we're absolutely glad about that. And that's the thing. Like it was, these things are terrifying anyway, Joe. But then you have like the T-Dot camera caught the tornado like traveling across the interstate, basically, on the news broadcast, which you don't see that happen very often. So just a really, really unfortunate weekend in our city. Unfortunately, we are pretty familiar with tornadoes and the damage that they cause around here. And like I said, as more information becomes available on how we can all help, we will certainly pass that along here on Robby and Rexrode when that information becomes a little bit more sorted out. Joe, also the passing of Frank Wycheck over the weekend at the age of 52. We're going to get into that, his life, his legacy as a member of the Titans coming up next. We'll take your thoughts on that all show long. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We're taking your thoughts all show long. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. Joe, beloved Titans tight end Frank Wycheck passing away at the age of 52 over the weekend. I saw this yesterday. I logged on Twitter and saw this story from Kuharski, from paulkuharski.com, and it was just sickening to see this happen. Passing away at the age of 52. Kuharski included a statement from the family in the piece, quote, "At this time, it appears Frank Wycheck fell inside his Chattanooga, Tennessee home and hit his head on Saturday morning. He was found unresponsive that afternoon. Wycheck moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee this past summer to be closer to his family. He leaves behind 2 adult daughters, Deanna and Madison, both married, and 3 grandchildren, Leo, Stevie, and August." This is coming from paulkuharski.com. Just a tragic situation, Joe, passing away at the age of 52. You know, obviously, as a kid growing up here, I remember watching Frank Wycheck and how good a player he was with the Titans. Like, for me, it was Steve McNair, Eddie George, and Frank Wycheck. Like, those are my 3 guys growing up watching the Titans play in the early part of their tenure here in Nashville. And obviously, you know, there's the Music City Miracle that comes to mind and his role in that. But even beyond that, I mean, in his career, he played 155 games, 505 catches, 5,126 yards, 28 touchdowns. You know, I remember some trick plays they used to run where they'd line him up, McNair would toss it out wide to him, and he would throw the ball down the field. I think he ended up, I saw some numbers yesterday, I think in his career, like 5 of 6 with a few touchdown passes doing that as well. It's just fun to watch Frank Wycheck play. And then obviously, Joe, he went on to have a heck of a radio career here too, with doing Titans radio with Mike Keith, and obviously our friends Kevin Ingram and the late Mark Howard, and their successful run that they had for a decade plus. I mean, it was just a guy that was well recognized in this city, beloved in this city, and really tragic to see that news over the weekend as well.
Yeah, 52 years old, and it's just it's very sad. It's been, a few years that Frank has kind of been out of the public eye, and it kind of ended abruptly. I'm sure for people who were following along, you go back to around 2017, he basically said he believed, he's sure he has CTE as a result of his career. He had said then publicly he planned to donate his brain, and he kind of had to get out of radio and get out of doing Titans radio and all that. He was I loved that show. That's my recollections are, I love that show, and of course we've lost 2 of those 3 people now.
Yeah.
In recent times, which is also just tragic on its own. And he was just a super nice guy, and a beloved guy who in 2 different ways sort of was central here in the sports scene. And for people who don't remember, I mean, Frank Wycheck was, back then you're talking, 3-time Pro Bowler. I mean, back then you're talking, Tony Gonzalez, and, Antonio Gates was just kind of starting to become a great player. But I mean, he was right there with anyone, for a stretch. You think about 7 straight years he played every game in a season.
Yeah.
7 straight years, 95 to 01, played every game, and he's still 3rd in this franchise in receptions. I mean, Ernest Givens and Haywood Jeffries going to go back to the run and shoot and Warren Moon, and it's just all, Warren Moon would throw it 55 times a game, and Wycheck is 3rd behind those 2 guys with 482 catches. So he's a great player, great ambassador, and it's just really sad. And I don't want to, his family said he fell. I mean, I don't want to speculate if they're, like he was struggling in general before that or not, but I just know that 52 years old is way too early.
Yeah, no question about that. And, I was thinking back yesterday just from his playing days, remembering watching him play, and it was interesting to read PK's write-up. We're going to have Teresa Walker coming up here at 6:30 to discuss, her memories of Frank Wycheck. But I had forgotten actually that he was drafted by Washington in '93, and then was a $100 waiver claim by the Oilers in 1995.
Yeah.
And boy, did that work out for the Titans. And Kuharski goes on to talk about in his piece just kind of Wycheck's path to getting to the Titans and the NFL, and how he stayed there. And David Beauclair put up a really nice piece on Facebook yesterday of just kind of his memories of Frank Wycheck and just kind of his path to get there, and how he always kind of felt like just because of his path that somebody was always looking to take his job. So he made sure that he knew what he was like, knew how to do everything on the field for the Titans. And, you look back at his career, think about '99, the season where they get to the Super Bowl. I mean, he was targeted 108 times that year at the tight end position, ended up with 69 catches, 641 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But, think about that, especially with the way that the game was played then. I mean, the Titans, they didn't throw the ball a ton back in those days. I mean, it was a lot of turnaround, handing the ball off to Eddie George. And in '99, Wycheck got targeted 108 times. The following year in 2000, when they were the best team in the league in the regular season, he got targeted 109 times that year with 70 catches, 636 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he was by far, Steve McNair's favorite target. Steve McNair looked his way a lot, and he was a really good player on the field. And then obviously, the play that was kind of circulating all around NFL circles yesterday, Joe, was the Music City Miracle and his lateral on that play, and what a role he played in that for the Titans. But, a really, really good player. I got to meet him a couple of times, and like you said, he was always extremely nice to me. I always enjoyed being around Frank, and just a tragic, tragic loss. And I know he's a guy that means a lot to this community, particularly if you're a Titans fan, that's been around for a long time and was here back in those days when, it was McNair and George, and they got to the Super Bowl that first year. Like, Wycheck was a huge part of that team, if you think back to some of the numbers he put up.
Oh, no question. Yeah, it wasn't just the Music City Miracle, of course. I mean, he was a central part of that offense. I mean, eventually Derek Mason became a great receiver, for the Titans in the years to come. On that team, he was kind of a returner, and they didn't, they didn't have like a superstar on the outside. They kind of spread it around, but Wycheck he was kind of the constant. And, another thing that I've seen a lot of, I saw from PK and Beauclair and Terry McCormick, George Plaster, Gentry wrote a good column and quoted Plaster, but the sort of, the outreach and the sort of getting people into this team and this franchise back then, like those guys. And I know, talking to Floyd, I know that it was very much, discussed, like this is something we have to do. But still, some people, everybody's going to do their obligations, and some people are going to go above and beyond. And, Wycheck was obviously a guy who went way above and beyond, along with, McNair and Eddie George. They were kind of that was kind of your trio of guys who weren't just great players, but also were like the primary ambassadors to kind of get this city into this new franchise. Well,
and then taking what you did on the field, which was significant here if you're Wycheck, and then moving into the radio fold, both on the Titans broadcast and then the show with Kevin and Mark. It was kind of, Jared talked about this yesterday on Twitter, which I thought was well said. Kind of the first instance of a high level athlete here in our city, taking that next step into the media forum and having the connection that way of going from being a player to being a part of where, if you're a fan, you feel like you can reach out and talk to him every day about what's going on, and he can explain what's happening on the field. He was the radio analyst when Delaney Walker was here, and hearing him break down some of the things that Delaney Walker was really good at. I remember, just kind of listening to that and being like, wow, I never would have thought about it that way in terms of just the way that he explained things, especially at the tight end position. So, obviously him and Mike Keith were a team together for a long time on Titans radio, and just hearing things explained that way, Frank was kind of the first guy in this city that did that, going from his playing days.
Yeah, he was great at he was great at he was funny. He was
Yeah.
engaging, but he was really good at the technical aspects of breaking things down. And then, I mean, that's one of the, for me moving here, it was appointment listening for me for those guys. And, between um, Kevin's Mike Krzyzewski impersonation and, Mark's snarkiness. And then, I mean, really, Mark and Frank both could sort of trade the snark back and forth while Kevin, sort of ran the whole thing. And it was really, really enjoyed it a lot. And it showed, a lot of that personality. Again, it's like that all sort of ended abruptly, and you kind of knew at that time, that he was really struggling. And PK wrote about in his piece, PK's piece I thought was really good. And it's free, by the way, at paulkarski.com, about, he also has like some social anxiety as well to go with all of that too, So, I mean, he dealt with some stuff, and what I really appreciate is that he was willing to talk about that stuff, because a lot of people deal with stuff. And when someone like that is dealing with it and is willing to be open about it, I mean, that's how, you can really help some people.
Yep. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Teresa Walker from the Associated Press. She covered Frank Wycheck's career here with the Titans. We'll get her thoughts on Frank Wycheck, his life, his legacy as he passes away over the weekend at the age of 52. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Frank Wycheck tragically passing away over the weekend at the age of 52. And to help us discuss the life and legacy of Frank Wycheck, a Titans great, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend Teresa Walker from the Associated Press. Teresa, good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, but I will say that news coming across yesterday, it was a kick to the gut. I mean, having covered Frank and knowing why he retired, it wasn't a huge surprise. I think those of us who'd been around him, who'd covered him, knew that he was struggling. The concussions had taken a bit of a toll on his health, but to get that, when you know somebody – and 52, it is a kick to the gut.
Yeah, no question about that. So, Teresa, we were just kind of going through Frank's kind of legacy here in terms of what he did on the field, which was really significant, obviously, for the Titans. He moved into broadcasting after his career was over with here. But when you think about your dealings with Frank over the years, what comes to mind?
Well, he's what we call a go-to guy. He was the guy, along with Eddie George, Steve McNair, and Aldo Greco when he was here, that when you needed somebody to talk to, whether it was after a practice, after a win, after a tough loss, there were a bunch of those first couple of years. I mean, the trips to Memphis and then the games at Vanderbilt as the Tennessee Oilers, those were tough games. Stand up at the locker and talk. No matter how, especially after the final game of his career, the 17-14 loss in New England, a divisional game that had been at that point the coldest game in franchise history. He talked and then shook hands with everybody going out of the locker, the media, because he knew he'd had 2 concussions that season. We were kind of worried about him coming back. I later talked to him. For a story a colleague was doing when Wes Welker was looking to get back quickly from a concussion playing with the Broncos. And then I talked to him again before for the NFL's 100th season. And let's not forget, I had somebody on social media say he was a Titans great. That's what needed to be in your headline. And I'm like, he was the guy who threw the lateral on a play, the Music City Miracle, that as the NFL celebrated its 100th season, was still ranked as the 4th best play in league history.
Yep. And
I'm sorry, I put that, as great as he was for this franchise, and he was great. I mean, he led this team in receptions 3 straight seasons. Yeah, I mean, he was Steve McNair's best buddy when he needed somebody to be open, and he always was open. And the man had a perfect passer rating. I think he was 5 or 6. So when they needed him on trick plays, that was the guy. So it's like, I'm sorry. In my estimation, yes, he was deservedly put into the Ring of Honor for this team in 2013.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you just about that day, Teresa, and what just that moment in that stadium, in that press box with Frank and that play. What I mean, obviously we all know the play and the delay waiting for the review and all these things, but what else really stands out for you about that?
Well, Joe, I'll say this. Barry Wilner, who recently retired from the Associated Press, after the Bills kicked the field goal to go up, he turned to me because I was standing up. This may have been the last morning kickoff for an NFL playoff game, Bills-Titans, okay? I mean, I think it kicked off at like 11:30. It was ridiculous, right? And, you watch the drive. My husband, who was in the stands, actually used that moment to go to the bathroom so that, he was trying to beat the end of game rush to the restroom. So he missed the play. But Barry Wilner turns to me because I'm standing up getting ready to go downstairs to the Titans locker room. I'm already thinking of my sidebar, yet another playoff disappointment for a franchise who I had watched the AFC championship losses with Earl Campbell and Dan Pastorini as the Houston Oilers. And I was thinking of the Mike Renfro touchdown that should have been called a touchdown catch. And he says, "Don't worry, I always get the weird ones. Don't forget, He had covered the Buffalo-Houston playoff game where Houston
35-3.
Yes, and he said, I always get the weird one. So I'm standing, and where our seats were that day, it was a little weird. I'm kind of on the line almost with the throw by Frank. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, that's a lateral. Now, the only thing I didn't know is, first you look for a flag, because everybody's watching, and it's like, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. And you're looking for a flag. Then you watch the official go under the hood to watch the replay, and you're thinking, okay, now what matters is, do they have the right TV angle to show that ball? Because if you've watched that replay at any time at all, Kevin Dyson's got that left leg is stretched, and then he goes backwards to catch the ball. And Frank, he turns after the little pitch from Lorenzo Neal and then throws it, and he knew he had to get it back. And I had talked to him about that for the 100th anniversary. Look back at that play as part of the 100th season, and he knew that it went backward. And it was just a matter of, would they find a replay? And when they came out, and everybody in the stadium is on their feet, no, I don't know if anyone's breathing with anticipation, because it's all hanging on what that official would say. And when he said that the place stood, that place went insane. I mean, you already had people standing and waiting. Our top photographer in Tennessee, Mark Humphrey, was on the Buffalo sideline preparing to shoot what we call jubo shots of celebration, because, you have to position like that, right? And then it just slips on a moment like that. And then from there, I mean, that play, everyone's celebrating, and I'll guarantee you there's a million people who weren't there that day who will tell you now, I was there to watch that play. And that's the thing. It launched that run to the Super Bowl, still the only Super Bowl appearance for that franchise in their 60-plus years. And it was just a thrilling ride. I would be in town, through that run and, go out to get lunch, and people would say, man, did you see that play? Did you see that play? And it was the lateral from Frank that truly just set up just the wildest ride in sports that I have ever been a part of.
Teresa Walker with us here on Robby and Rexrode. And Teresa, I mean, it's kind of wild to relive that, because I remember watching that live as well. And then, Frank.
You were alive, Robby?
Yes, I was, barely. I was like 7 at the time this all went down. But, and then Frank, after that, goes on to obviously have a great broadcasting career. He did, Titans Radio with Mike Keith, obviously the show with Kevin Ingram and Mark Howard as well. And we were talking about this last segment. Like, to me, in some ways, he kind of felt like the first professional athlete here in our city to offer that perspective and to be, in the booth where you felt like he was just kind of watching the game with you, Joe Schmo, the casual fan, and explaining things in a way that, you never really heard explained before here in our city. Obviously, his personality, just from being around him, not a surprise that he went on to be a great broadcaster.
Oh, none at all. And his predecessor was Pat Ryan, who was on the call for the Music City Miracle and still works Tennessee Volunteer football games. And Pat was great, but Frank was a part of that group that had, and people forget, that 5-year run, their first 5 years as the Titans, was among the best in the NFL. I mean, they reached 2 AFC championship games, the Super Bowl, the divisional loss at New England, the win at Baltimore, a game that's more known for Gary Anderson's touchdown or field goal, and Eddie George hurting his shoulder and coming back in and just mowing over Ray Lewis. But, then when Frank transitioned into the booth and became the color analyst, he was that era. He was the guy who helped cement this NFL franchise in Nashville and in the state of Tennessee. I mean, people don't remember now. I mean, I was at a sporting goods store yesterday, and I'm seeing the Oilers throwbacks, and remembering the fight. It's like, we don't have oil derricks in Tennessee. Why are they calling them the Oilers? We want our own nickname. And how they were ignored in Memphis and at Vanderbilt in '98. And people said, we want our own. Bud Adams changed the nickname to help sell tickets for the new stadium. And I think Frank and Craig Hentrick, Blaine Bishop were all part of that group that, helped to show off the new uniforms when they finally brought them out, the flaming thumbtack, as they called it then. But Frank being in the booth and being on radio as part of that morning show, he helped continue the buy-in to this franchise after that incredible run because, let's not forget it. There were some tough years. And those 5-27 seasons were painful. But because you had Frank, a guy who had been a part of the greatness that helped cement this franchise, that is as much a part of his legacy as what he did on the field. And let's not forget, this is a guy, 6th-round draft pick by Washington out of Maryland. The then Houston Oilers, Floyd Reese claimed him off waivers. And then he ends up, when he retired, he was 4th all-time among tight ends in receptions. And, that's the thing. This guy was not just, an everyman who worked his way onto the roster. He caught passes, and he led this team when they were looking for a receiving threat, and they were struggling. Does that ring a bell, anybody? But he was the guy who stepped up. And, I'm going to be helping pick the 25-year anniversary team for the Titans. There was never, ever a doubt who one of the starting tight ends is for this team. It's Frank Wycheck for what he meant to this franchise.
Yeah, and speaking of legacy, Teresa, obviously, he's been outspoken about his issues and about the fact that he was going to, as the family confirmed yesterday, essentially donate his brain and be part of the studies on CTE and brain injuries. What about that aspect of his legacy, but also just the last few years for Frank?
Well, that's the thing. When he was replaced by Coach Mack, and we all loved Coach Dave McGinnis for the 2017 season, I think fans started worrying. And then when when he was no longer on the morning radio and you didn't hear from him, I think people were, it felt like, almost like he went into hiding. But when I talked to him in 2014, he knew he had done some research about the lingering effects and about if going back into the game, and he had studied upon it, and he knew that it could potentially be fatal. And that's why he had made the commitment to make sure that he had, a connection and that whatever happened to him when he passed, that it would be studied. I talked with him over, the CTE and the brain research, back in 2017, he made clear that he was going to be a part of this to help study, part of the, there was a study in 2017 that was part of the Journal of the American Medical Association, the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, and he was a part of that. That journal case in 2017 looked at people from Ken Stabler and Dave Duerson, but it also included, other people. And Frank Wycheck, he made very clear that he planned to donate his brain for research. And at that time, what he said, some people have heads made of concrete, and it doesn't really affect some of those guys. But CT is real. And this is when he was 45. I know I'm suffering through it, and it's been a struggle, and I feel for all the guys out there going through this. So when, to read the details that he was at his home in Chattanooga, apparently fell and was found Saturday afternoon. They don't know exactly when he fell Saturday, but he was found Saturday afternoon. It's just, it's tough not to think. I love the sport of the NFL. That was, of all the sports that I've covered, football, the NFL particularly, has been my love because I've watched it since the 70s. But it's tough because you see the effects that they have on that playing this game has on people, and knowing the likely impact that it had on Frank, shortening his life, and more importantly, the enjoyment of his life after retirement at the age of 32. Guys, he still was under contract. He still had the talent. He could have played longer had he wanted to, but because he had 2 concussions in about a month or so, he knew that he needed to step away because those weren't just the first 2 concussions, unfortunately, that he had suffered in his career.
Yeah, no question about that. Well, Teresa, really appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for taking time to join us this morning. I wish it was under better circumstances, but I really enjoyed your perspective on this. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure, and same. And next time, hopefully, it'll be a happier circumstance.
Yep, absolutely. Teresa Walker from the Associated Press, our
Thanks,
guest
Teresa.
here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your thoughts on the passing of Frank Wycheck. Give us your best Frank Wycheck memory. 615-737-1025, our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063 The Game. Join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason at Twin Peaks in Madison today from 4 to 6 p.m. for our NFL pregame show. They'll break down the Titans' Week 14 matchup against the Dolphins and give you the latest updates before the game. Our NFL pregame show presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment and Beast Unleashed. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. We are live from our 102.5 The Game studio, brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Taking your thoughts on the passing of Frank Wycheck. That news coming out over the weekend. Frank Wycheck passing away at the age of 52. Obviously, a great player for the Tennessee Titans, a beloved broadcaster as well. We'll take your thoughts on that all show long. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Thanks so much to Teresa Walker for being with us in the last segment. And, Joe, obviously, like I said earlier, the Music City Miracle was going around all over the place yesterday on social media after the announcement of Frank's passing came out. And, it is funny to think back to, like, the argument of, was that a lateral? Was that not a lateral? That Bills fans, some of them still to this day, are convinced that it wasn't. And anytime I've ever seen Frank Wycheck,
media people,
which is kind of amazing. They've done like sports science on this and proved that it was a lateral. But anytime Frank Wycheck was asked about it, he was like, "No, I know it was a lateral. The only thing I was thinking the whole time was make sure it's a lateral." So it was always funny to hear, Frank's kind of response to the conspiracy theorists out there that thought it was a forward pass.
Yeah, I mean, like Adam Schefter still says it's not a lateral. Like it's been absolutely verified. There's, don't even get me started. I will say, it's like every time you watch it, and I remember watching it live at the time, that because of the camera angle, which of course was, to the left of them, it did look it like in real time. Like I remember like watching it over again, he scores and stuff, and I remember being like, oh my gosh, but also like, and even Wade Phillips was like, you could see him on the sidelines like, yeah, it's forward pass. That was sort of the, but then as soon as he got different angles, like, oh my gosh, it was almost straight up, but that's also a lateral. As long as you don't go forward, it's lateral. And yesterday, by the way, I thought that Travis Kelce was about to do the ultimate tribute against the Bills to Frank Wycheck with his play that I thought was going to win that game, but of course was called for an offsides on Kadarius Toney.
Yes.
But I mean, number 4, I mean, I'm trying to think of, honestly, you tell me, I don't know the list, but number 4 in the all-time NFL plays, I'm trying to think of like what are the obvious, because that's just an obvious one, right?
Yeah.
It's just like there's been Hail Marys, but no, there's like there was one like a sort of a Ahmad Rashad against the Browns in the playoffs.
The immaculate reception comes to mind, stuff like that. But
what was the immaculate reception?
I want to say it may have been number 1 on that list. If I have to go back and verify though. I need to go back.
No, but there's so many plays that are called that. Which one are we talking about here?
Oh, Franco Harris.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably number 1. I mean, that's like the dynasty maybe doesn't happen without that one. And you got no good camera. Yeah. So, but like those two, right?
Yeah.
Because it's got to be, a playoff, an incredible, postseason play that changes a loss to a victory, right? And those two would have a case for, as memorable as any.
Yeah, no question. And I had forgotten. Obviously, like I talked about earlier, you watch Frank Wycheck play, and he was in his heyday when the Titans basically came here. They came to Memphis, as Teresa laid out there, and then they played 1 year at Vanderbilt, and then the Adelphia Coliseum at the time opens up here, and he's at the top of his game when Adelphia opens up. I mean, you look through the numbers, and by the time he gets done, like you said, I mean, he retired at the age of 32. So think about that. Age of 32, he retires, 505 catches, over 5,100 yards, had 28 touchdowns. Obviously, and Teresa talked about this, he could have still played. Like, he was still good enough to play. His last year, he only played in 10 games because of the injuries, 17 catches, 165 yards. So, I mean, the injuries were starting to catch up at that point, but only 32 when he retired from the NFL.
It's kind of amazing, too, to think about him and all he did, and Delaney Walker and all he did, and the draft statuses of both, basically afterthoughts who early in their career, I mean, Delaney Walker was he played some of the Niners, but obviously Wycheck not long with Washington, and then come to this franchise and have great success. So I'm looking at this list, if the Titans would have gotten that last yard, won that game, which of course they would have had to win in overtime, but I think this would be number 2. Immaculate reception, hard to argue with that. And they also have like the catch, which is Montana to Dwight Clark, which is a great play, but I mean, it may be a little bit overrated. The Tyree using his head to catch that pass from Eli is number 3, which is a great play, and that was an incredible win. That's the thing. What does it lead to, right? Yep. I think that's a big part of it too. Then Malcolm Butler with the pick at the goal line. So, but you're talking, and I mean that play, 20 years from now, 30, 40. I mean, it's not going anywhere.
No.
Just like the catch Dwight Clark. I mean, that was like 1981. So that's part of that day, and just that legacy for Frank Wycheck. He'll never go away.
Matt on the text line says favorite memories of Wycheck were his raw emotional reactions during incredible plays. For example, Nate Washington's leap and reach over the defender to catch the ball, recover on his feet, and go for a touchdown. Frank's reaction to that was broadcast in gold. Jim on the text line says favorite memory of Frank is him blowing kisses to the crowd in the aftermath of the Music City Miracle. Also liked hearing him talk about his 158.3 career passer rating. He did have a perfect passer rating for his career, which he did like to talk about, which was always funny.
Yeah, well, he had fantastic passing stats.
There's
another, you talk about Wycheck to Delaney Walker, and in that way, I guess it's Wycheck to Derrick Henry, right?
Yeah. Just passing the torch.
Heck of a passer.
Yeah, no question about it. We'll take your thoughts on Frank Wycheck all show long. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Would love to hear your favorite memories of number 89 for the Titans. We'll take them on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, we'll get into the weekend that was in the NFL. Look ahead to the Titans and the Dolphins coming up tonight as well. All that next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care and the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We'll be joined by Corey Curtis from News 2 coming up at 8 o'clock. We'll get his thoughts on the life and legacy of Frank Wycheck, passing away at the age of 52. We've discussed his life, his career all show long to this point. We welcome your thoughts on that throughout the show. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll also look ahead to the Titans and the Dolphins coming up tonight on Monday Night Football with Corey Curtis as well. Joe, in the weekend that was in the NFL, some interesting games, including a thriller between the Vikings and the Raiders that was 0-0 forever, that Minnesota ends up winning 3-0. Just a masterpiece, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed watching. You had the Bills and Chiefs game yesterday, as you mentioned. Buffalo wins 20-17. They improved to 7-6. So that's a huge win for Buffalo. Some controversy after the game with the play that you mentioned. Kadarius Toney lines up offsides, gets flagged for offensive offsides. On that play, Mahomes throws it to Kelsey. He runs around and then laterals it back to Toney for a touchdown with, I believe, like 1:12 remaining in the fourth quarter or something like that to give Kansas City the lead, and then the play is called back due to the flag. Patrick Mahomes, very upset about that play, acting like a child on the sidelines, and then continuing to complain to Josh Allen as they met in midfield rather than just shaking his hand and walking off the field last night, which was interesting. What did you make of the end of the game between Kansas City and Buffalo?
Yeah, Mahomes didn't handle it great. It's really too bad that something like that would take that play off the board. But I'm looking like Jonathan Jones, who covers the NFL for CBS, has a picture, like the aerial picture. And I mean, Toney is just like, he's lined up way past the line.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be mad at somebody, if you're Patrick Mahomes, why don't you be mad at Kadarius Toney, who apparently can't line up properly?
Yeah. Now, I will say I can't recall, and I'm sure it's happened, but I just can't recall Andy Reid complaining about officials and he was going off about how it's embarrassing for the NFL. So according to him, there should have been some kind of communication. Now, and I don't know, like I think Toney said that he asked, right? So that's because obviously you see all the time. You watch an NFL game, watch the receivers. They're constantly, they're looking over to the officials to make sure they're good, so something like this, you have enough on the line and all that stuff. So, I mean, I guess if he did that and there was no communication or whatever, then that's obviously bad on the officials. They put out a big statement that they, try to explain it. This is a point of emphasis. I was called last night, so I think now that makes 12 this year.
Yeah.
3 all of last year. It's a point of emphasis. I mean, look, it is pretty simple. Like, don't line up offsides. So it's like when it comes down to it, it's another case of Kadarius Toney. Oh,
that's the thing.
Making some killer mistake like you just can't make.
If Kadarius Toney catches like one of about 7 footballs that he dropped against the Detroit Lions in week 1, and he keeps himself on sides in this game, Kansas City's 10-3. I mean, it's as simple as that. And look, I hate that this is making me like take the side of Gene Steratore and officials like that, because I always complain about those guys. But he put this out last night, and I completely agree. He says, when officiating the line of scrimmage, general philosophy is to not be overly technical and split hairs on very minor infractions, such as receivers' hands slightly breaking line of scrimmage. However, when an infraction is so egregious and obvious, a flag has to be thrown. Kadarius Toney is blatantly lined up offside and in the neutral zone. You rarely see an offsides penalty on the offense, but that's not because this play in Buffalo, Kansas City isn't a foul. It's because a receiver rarely lines up offsides. This is from Gene Steratore that he put out last night.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, you do this how many times, every Sunday, not to mention practice, your entire life. Like, if you're Kadarius Toney, how could you stand there where he stood? Like, how could you not at any point look and see where everybody else is lined up and line up correctly. Then all of this goes away. So it's just bizarre and just a weird. I mean, just for both of those teams. I mean, Buffalo is now alive, but still, kind of way back. Still not at all locked to get in. The Chiefs have the Broncos actually nipping at their heels like we thought going into the 2022 season might actually happen. And here we finally are, where the Broncos are actually contender to win that division. But, a crazy week for Sean McDermott too, with the Tyler Dunn story about the story he told, about the terrorists of 9/11 and that like as I guess an example of teamwork. And then people, I mean, it's pretty wild.
What a league
around both those franchises. Yeah, exactly.
And then there's how about those Cowboys last night? 33-13, they take down Philadelphia at home. Dak Prescott 271, 2 touchdowns. Philadelphia has been steamrolled 2 weeks in a row. First by San Francisco at home, and then by Dallas on the road. What'd you think of that one last night on Sunday Night Football with the Cowboys and the Eagles?
Well, I think the Eagles are the third best team in the NFC at this point. Their defense is just I don't know why, but it's just not very good. I mean, I guess when you have when Zach Cunningham's a key player for your defense, and by the way, it's not like he's playing terrible, but I mean, I kind of tell you they got some issues.
Yeah.
On that side of the ball, and Jalen Hurts, I will say that AJ Brown and Devontae Smith did not help him enough last night. On a couple perfect passes he threw that they've got to catch. But Dallas absolutely looks great. The only problem is with Dallas, I've seen them play the Niners, right? I've seen them play the Niners. I know it was in San Fran. It was a few weeks ago. But I think Dak Prescott is a legit MVP candidate. I mean, I think that's fair. It still kind of, to me, speaks to a kind of an underwhelming year. I'd like to see Lamar Jackson possibly get a look there, as things progress, if they get the 1 seed. But I think the Cowboys are the second best team in the NFC, and I still think the Niners are absolutely the best team.
Jake Browning, MVP. What a day for the AFC South yesterday. Colts lose 34-14 to Cincinnati. Jaguars lose 31-27 to the Joe Flacco-led Cleveland Browns. And the Texans get thumped by Zach Wilson and the Jets 30-6. A banner day for the AFC South yesterday.
Yeah, and I don't want to overreact, but before he got hurt and left the game, which might jeopardize C.J. Stroud playing in Nissan Stadium Sunday, by the way, he wasn't quite at 100 yards. He was having an atrocious day.
Yes.
So, C.J. Stroud, who everybody's getting the gold jacket ready for. Now, I'm not going to overreact and say he stinks, but, let's all just wait and see how all that plays out with the quarterbacks. In the meantime, terrible day for the AFC South. And look at that. So the 6 through 11, that's 6 teams, all 7-6. Steelers, Colts, Texans, Broncos, Bengals, Bills.
Yeah.
6 teams.
It's wild.
And if you want to include the Jags, Browns, and Chiefs, who are all 8-5, that's 9 teams within a game of each other in this conference.
That's what the NFL loves.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a wild. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Titans have moved up to number 6 in the draft slot.
Mm-hmm. They have. No question about that. How about that? Got a chance tonight, if you lose to Miami. Could really do some things here. I mean, the Bears win against the Lions, so shout out to you for getting after us about that yesterday. Very disappointed in your Detroit Lions.
Yeah, they're bad. They're I mean, I don't know if you saw this play, but it's 4th and 3rd. It should have been called grounding on Justin Fields, but it wasn't. But so it's 4th and 13. And all they're doing is trying to draw the Lions off. I mean, they're not going. And then Aiden Hutchinson jumps on 4th and 13. So they get a free play. So it's like, all right, let's throw easy TD pass to DJ Moore here. Why not? I mean, just absolute classic Lions football.
Do you think it's a stretch to say that C.J. Stroud could be sitting this one out so Davis Mills has the opportunity to play in front of us one more time?
I think you've extended yourself there quite well in that thought. How exciting that'll be! Oh, goody!
I'm looking forward to it. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Titans and Dolphins coming up on Monday Night Football tonight. We'll look ahead to that next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, live from our 102.5 The Game studio, brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Got some tickets to give away before you can buy them to see Def Leppard, Journey, and Steve Miller Band at Nissan Stadium coming up on Saturday, July 20th. Be caller 5, 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Caller 5 will win a pair of tickets before you can buy them to see Def Leppard, Journey, and Steve Miller Band at Nissan Stadium coming up on Saturday, July 20th. 615-737-1025. The Titans and Dolphins coming up tonight on Monday Night Football. A nice Monday Night Football doubleheader tonight. Titans and Dolphins on ESPN. Packers Giants on ABC. I guess the NFL felt if they were going to put the Titans on Monday Night Football, they needed to have two games associated with it. Interesting tonight from the National Football League. But I guess I'm glad they did. Multiple viewing options.
I guess, going into the year, this looked like the potential for two good games because the Titans and Giants were both supposed to be good this year, but they're not.
They are not. No question about that. So the matchup is here. We've talked about it all week, Joe, kind of leading up to this game. I mean, on paper, this has the potential to look rough for the Titans out there tonight. Now, having said that, it's been kind of a weird weekend in the NFL with some of the matchups that we've seen and some of the scores that we've seen. So if you're the Titans, I mean, it is the National Football League. It's not like they're playing – it's Chattanooga taking on Alabama tonight out there if you're the Titans. But what do you make of this matchup, and how, if you're the Titans, do you try to slow down somebody that really hasn't been stopped all year long in Tyreek Hill, who is on pace to have 2,000 receiving yards, which would be the first player in the history of the league to accomplish that?
Yeah, well, Mike Vrabel has had a defensive plan, and this was Dean Pease. But even they still had Tyreek Hill, right, in 19 or not 19, 21, right? Yeah, yep. 21 when they did a great job. They've done a great job against him when he was with the Chiefs before with I wouldn't say a bunch of Pro Bowlers, in the secondary, certainly a cornerback. So, I mean, there's some things that you can do if you want to try to take away Tyreek Hill, but then the problem is that they also have Jalen Waddle and they have those two backs and they just do so many creative things. They have weapons everywhere. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach it. To me, the general answer on any of it is your edge people, it better be unbelievable. I mean, like if Arden Key has another reappearance, like Puxnatawny Phil, this would be a good time for that. There's no Jeffrey Simmons to cave in an offensive line in the interior, but Danico Autry, Landry. I mean, if those guys don't have huge nights and get all over Tua regularly, then it's going to be tough. And anybody who watches the Dolphins knows that Tua gets the ball out really fast. I mean, and this is like a criticism of him, which I find hilarious, but a lot of they do have a lot of big plays, chunk plays off ball out quick, and you get a little space and you got a really fast, talented guy with the ball, and he has a lot of yards after the catch. But Tua also, of course, can place the ball on deep shots as well as anyone. So it's a huge challenge. I mean, probably goes back to the offense having 11-minute drives.
Well, like you said, Jeffrey Simmons out of this game. Josh Wiley designated as out with a knee injury. Christian Fulton not playing with a hamstring injury in this game. So a little bit, especially when you're talking about Fulton and Simmons, those are two important guys on the defensive side of the ball that you're not going to have in this matchup. We have a called shot from Adam Vingan. Are you ready for this one? Adam Vingan says, called shot. This will be the second worst loss in Titans history behind the 59-0 loss to the Patriots in 2009. What do you think of that one?
Ooh, my goodness. Well, I mean, I can see how he got there, and I can get there. The conditions are there for something like that. Now, I also see, we got somebody on the text line, Wes and Clarksville, like Titans are going to win for Frank and the tornado victims. And I've seen people talking yesterday, apart from that, about, this totally sets up this weird weekend. And even like Titans fans kind of getting excited about the draft, like the Bears won, the Jets won, Now see the Titans go out and just randomly beat the Dolphins.
Right.
I think the truth will probably be somewhere in between those two things.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how they look tonight and if they can approach, yes, like trying to stop Miami's offense. But look, Miami's offense is so good that they're going to put up points and they're going to put up yards. I think I'm more intrigued by like the Titans offense in this game because Miami, like you look at their defense and they can get after the quarterback, which is not good news for this team with the offensive line the Titans have. They got Jalen Ramsey, in their secondary. So you would think that this could be, a shutdown defense. They really haven't been this year. I mean, look, Jalen Ramsey, ever since he's come back in there, he's made a huge difference for their team. So I'm interested to see what that looks like. But can the Titans move the ball against this Miami defense? And, like, how good are the Dolphins really? Because not that the Titans are going to be some huge litmus test for them, at least I don't think so. But we did go through their schedule last week. They've beaten one team that has an above 500 record right now, and that's Denver. Denver gets above 500 yesterday with their win against the Chargers. That's the only win that the Dolphins have this year against a team that's above 500. So I still don't know if we know exactly how good they are yet.
Yeah, and that's a win against a team that's above 500. That was a completely different team when they treated them like an FCS school.
Correct.
But that's the thing. The Dolphins seem to be when the Dolphins have a chance to absolutely load up on someone bad, they do.
Yes.
Which speaks to Vingan's prediction there. It's to me, it's like, they're going to have chunk plays, but can you tackle someone at the 14 and then force a field goal? Can you do that a few times? They're going to have big plays at your expense. They're going to, between the 20s, they're going to move, I'd say with ease. But can you get those red zone stops? And I think the Titans offense can have, and this is the excitement of this game is probably the same as any game now. It starts with, what can Will Levis do? Can they help him enough? And then can he step up on a big stage and make plays? I mean, I thought that Thursday night game at Pittsburgh against a really good defense with his team unable to block, I thought for the most part that was a really impressive performance by him, and they need that and then some tonight.
I got a texter that said this would be the Vrabelist of all Vrabel specials if they can pull this off tonight. The Vrabelist of all Vrabel specials.
Except past Vrabel specials have led to things.
There is that.
I mean, that's the problem. Like this Vrabel special, if it were to happen, just sort of hurts your draft position. Now I know there are people say, well, if the Titans win, they're 5-8 and they're only, they're a couple games behind the Colts and Texans and 3 behind the Jags, and the Jags come in here in the finale. Just get ready. I'm not going to introduce. I just introduced it, but I'm just introducing you that other people are going to say it. But yeah, I'm not saying there's hope at all. But I'm saying some people will say that. But to the point of the Vrabel special, it's like the Vrabel special should be a big win for your season, and that doesn't exist anymore for the Titans.
It's been a while since we've seen one of those. Been a while since we've seen a Vrabel special.
Just to see it. Yeah, just to see it would probably be encouraging for Titans fans. I get that.
We'll continue to take your thoughts on the Titans and the Dolphins, the matchup on Monday Night Football tonight, the Heisman Trophy awarded over the weekend as well. We'll get Joe's thoughts on Jaden Daniels taking the trophy home from LSU. That's coming up next. Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with us tomorrow morning at 8:45. Pick to Click is brought to you by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Preds fans, don't miss Wednesday night's Smashville live show at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs at 6 o'clock. You can see your Pred Star players up close and personal, get autographs and pictures. This week's special guests are Cole Smith and Tommy Novak. Smashville Live brought to you by the Black Abbey Brewing Company. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We'll have the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode coming up at 7:45. Corey Curtis from News 2 joining us at 8 o'clock. We'll get into the life and legacy of Frank Wycheck with him passing away over the weekend at the age of 52. Got more of your texts coming in on Wycheck and your favorite memories of him. Keep those coming. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Joe, the Heisman Trophy awarded over the weekend. Jaden Daniels takes it home. I believe he had 503 first-place votes. And you have a Heisman vote along with half the population of the United States. So 503 first-place votes for Jaden Daniels. Did you like the voting, the way that things went down? Was Jaden Daniels your Heisman winner on your ballot? Take us through your thought process of Jaden Daniels taking home the Heisman Trophy. How much were you influenced by Caroline Fenton?
Yeah, well, she made very good points. You know, I mean, Jaden Daniels, even now you can compare like all sorts of relevant stats of quarterbacks to all the other Heisman winners, and he's first in a lot of those categories. Yeah, Jaden Daniels was first on my ballot. Michael Penix second, Bo Nix third. A very boring ballot. And I like to sometimes with the third, you know, if there's like a clear top two or whatever, like, you know, maybe do a non-quarterback. I mean, look, I love voting for non-quarterbacks whenever possible. Devontae Smith was on my ballot first. As I've said before, I think my first year I voted for the Heisman was 2003. I voted for Larry Fitzgerald. Jason White of Oklahoma won the Heisman.
Correct.
And at that point, you know, it was the air raid, and Jason White was just a guy who was not going to be an NFL quarterback, but he had big numbers, and they dominated, and it was ridiculous. And then in 2009, Ndamukong Suh was first on my ballot, and that, like, I really, really wish Twitter – I mean, I guess it existed, but I was not on Twitter then in 2009. I was so outraged. I mean, I think I blogged about it. I was so outraged in 2009 that people didn't see that this was the best player in college football. Ndamukong Suh for Nebraska. Absolutely dominant, like the best player, period, in college football. And I don't know, he finished fifth because he's a defensive player. And like Mark Ingram won it for having like a 1,500-yard season with a loaded Alabama team. Like, just ridiculous. This year, I do absolutely believe in the idea of contributing to greatness, to team greatness. So I know some people are like, oh, great, best player in the best team, win the Heisman. And it's not that, and it shouldn't be that. But I do care if you have special moments in huge games and you like win a league championship or you have an undefeated team or whatever. I mean, that matters to me. And that's why it was close, because Michael Penix checked those boxes. But when it comes down to it, this is a vote for the best player in college football. And I know LSU lost 3 games. And so there's, you know, Penix people out there screaming about how, oh, great, a 3-loss team. And he didn't have a memorable game after October and all this stuff. And in the huge game he did play, he didn't play that great, and they lost to Florida State. But he was the best player in college football. And I think it's one of those things, like, if you watched him enough this year, and that's a regional thing. I mean, Heisman voting does get regional. I think that was pretty clear.
Where do you think he's going to get drafted? That's really interesting to me, like the Jaden Daniels draft part of this, because we've talked about Caleb Williams and Drake May all year long, obviously. You know, there's Penix that's involved in this. Bo Nix is coming out in the draft. Where do you think Jaden Daniels is going to get drafted?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
And I'm seeing some high projections for Jaden Daniels. And I've seen some draft people say, like, he has demonstrated here in the last couple of years just the ability to make all the throws that you had not seen at Arizona State. I mean, at Arizona State, he was an exciting player, but he was a running quarterback, and it was like, I mean, I didn't think that much of LSU getting him. I thought eventually someone would overtake him. So he's just improved. He's improved a ton. That's what you're supposed to do. And so I think he's a first-round pick. But I'm going to be really interested once we get into the draft process. I mean, it's like, look, at this time a year ago, I think we had this discussion. I think we both were like, Anthony Richardson needs to come back for a year. He's not ready, right? I mean, and also like Will Levis, boy, that's rough. That's a rough. I mean, it's just so hard to know. And then once we got in the draft process, people I work with, Brugler and Baumgartner, those guys are like going through the film on Richardson. Man, he's a high pick right now. He doesn't mean he's ready. I mean, look at some of the guys in the NFL. Jake Browning, you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got like the greatest numbers ever for the first 3 starts of a quarterback in NFL history. Your guy, Jordan Love, who we're going to see tonight. He was bad. What was that game he played against the Chiefs? Was that 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
That was 2 years ago.
He was terrible.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's not a pro, which, by the way, if you want to talk about all this stuff, when you get into like Malik Willis, I mean, hey, I'm just saying, like, people can improve. I don't think he's going to be a starting quarterback. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying people can improve. And even in college, look at Joe Burrow. Speaking of LSU, the year before he won the Heisman, he was good. And it was like, oh, that's a nice pickup for LSU, Maybe he could have played at Ohio State. And then the next year, we know what happened. One of the greatest teams and one of the greatest seasons for an individual and team. So all of which is to say, Jaden Daniels has gotten so much better. And, yeah, I think he's a first-round pick. And he is, look, like when you are as good as he is at just seeing things and escaping, and he's going to be a real problem for defenses in the NFL.
I agree. I think he's really good. And I think if you're – and the other part of this is too, Joe, like if you're the Titans and you get through the end of this season and you're convinced that Will Levis is your guy, which I think is probably going to be the route they take here, having all these quarterbacks kind of floating around and being available and potentially being high first-round picks, that's really good news for the Titans because either, number one, you love a quarterback so much that you take him, or number two, you can trade out and get some more picks, which they desperately need with this roster. So all these quarterbacks and the strength of this class, I think that's good news for the Tennessee Titans as they head into the draft. We always find a way to bring it back to the draft, and I'm becoming more and more responsible for it. I'm just saying, it's good news for the Titans that all these quarterbacks are floating around like first-round grades. No,
it absolutely is. I mean, I think we were talking about this with PK, right? Like, you if you load it up at the top and everybody and who all is drafting quarterbacks this year, I mean, I guess it's starting to look more like the Bears won't be. Are the Bears they're going to rip off some wins and stick with Justin Fields and just try to continue to build around him? Maybe. I think a few weeks ago it was a lock that they were going to draft a quarterback, but no, I mean, I think that you absolutely – most years that's what happens. I mean, a couple of years ago you had the crazy year with just a terrible quarterback draft. But most years that's what happens is you have some quarterbacks that that kind of rise. And I think that J.J. McCarthy's another one. By the way, speaking of the Heisman, somebody gave J.J. McCarthy a first place vote in the Heisman race.
Yeah.
And someone gave Blake Corum that too. And I promise you that neither of those people will admit their ballots. Like that's kind of the thing now. Like, in fact, I guess I didn't even tweet out my ballot. I just put it on The Athletic on our live blog, but whatever. Like, people reveal their ballots. No one will do that there. And that's where you're like, your Heisman voting. If you just have slappies of a team who are voting for the Heisman, then like the slappies for the teams that are voting need to stop. Like, that needs to be a vote that gets taken away.
Well, it's like the people at SEC Media Days in the preseason poll that there's like 8 of them that voted for Vanderbilt to win the conference. It's like interesting voting going on there.
But see, that to me is people clowning the process. Like, that's just like, yeah, like that's not actually, there aren't 8 people who cover Vanderbilt. You know what I mean? Right. So that's not like, I really love Vanderbilt. That's just like, let's just clown this whole process and put Vanderbilt for. But J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum, to me, I promise you, is like slappy Wolverines fans with press credentials who are voting for J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum. But J.J. McCarthy is a guy who, like Brugler's mock draft, does not have a huge run on quarterbacks, but he does have Jaden going 7th to the Bucs. but there's other guys that could move up, like guys like J.J. McCarthy, like Michael Penix. Right now, he's got those guys down a little bit, but that's what happens in this draft. They end up moving up, and then teams want to move up to get them.
Let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Dylan. Dylan, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We're good.
Real quick, I just wanted to shout out to Frank Wycheck, and I thought it was really cool that last night to watch the Chiefs. I don't know if Andy Reid dialed this up or not as an homage to Frank Wycheck, but seeing that toss back to Kadarius Toney, and just like the force, everything balances itself. That call was reversed, but our call was kept in. So shout out to Frank Wycheck, man.
Yep, thanks for the call, Dylan. Appreciate it. I mean, we kind of talked about that earlier, like the Kelsey play to Kadarius Toney. I don't know that it was drawn up. From the way Mahomes talks about it, it just kind of sounds like it was Kelsey looking back and making a play there. But it was obviously a heads-up play by him. Unfortunately for Travis Kelsey and the Chiefs, Kadarius Toney was playing defensive end on that play, and it didn't count. He's lined up in the secondary of the Bills' defense.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, the
Pretty
Jonathan
egregious.
Jones tweet is like of the aerial view. It's like, dude, how did you never look?
Yeah.
Like your entire body's past the ball. It's just.
It's
I mean, so what are these guys supposed to do? And I do, like, even with it's like the play clock, right? Like a lot of times you'll see if they get the snap off within like a second or so, it's fine, which I think is fine. And like Sterator said, your hands over or whatever, like a little. But this was just like, what? What are you doing?
It's egregious.
I'm very interested. Like, obviously, there's emotion right after a game. Mahomes lost his emotion. And even Andy Reid is popping off.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see after they've looked at everything what they will be saying this week about that. I bet you they'll be walking it back a little bit.
I did think about this, though. After the missed pass interference against the Chiefs in the Packers game, and then this yesterday, they're going to get every call the rest of the year down the stretch. I mean, they're going to get calls left and right, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let me tell you something. The Eagles should have won the Super Bowl. The ridiculous holding call
I know.
that won the Chiefs the Super Bowl. So they've had plenty of breaks. Now you go back to the Brady roughing when they should have been in that Super Bowl. Well, they were owed a few from that one, but I think they're fine.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Coming up next, it's time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
Who we gonna crush? The gods! Who we gonna kill? The gods! Who we gonna kiss? The gods! Gotcha.
It is that time of the day, time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning at 7:45. Joe Rexrode's rant of the day. Joseph, the floor is yours. So I turn things over to you.
Okay, well, back to Frank Wycheck and you know, the tragedy of his life after football, in terms of, you know, the way that he was bothered and the way that he was driven to, you know, to try to help science and pledging his brain. I want to, if anybody doesn't follow Chris Nowinski at Chris Nowinski 1, he's the CEO of Concussion Legacy Foundation. He is also a former WWE wrestler. But his life basically has become, and he played football, I think, at Harvard. You know, his life has become brain injury, CTE, and he is, I'd say, the most outspoken advocate for these things. And I remember when this happened, but he was tweeting about this yesterday, when Frank Wycheck passed away at age 52. I'll read some of what Chris wrote. He said, quote, "I'm heartbroken. He was in the first group of athletes to publicly pledge to donate their brain in 2008. We owe him a great debt. We talked about getting treatment, staying hopeful. He had chronic post-concussion symptoms, but he fought." And Chris said, like, "I literally cold called Wycheck. He was so generous. He helped start a trend of brain donation and has made football safer for those who followed him. He will be missed." So it's not just that Frank Wycheck pledged that. And again, that's 2008, folks.
Yeah.
So you're going back to kind of the early days of sort of this awakening and realization of what these guys are doing to their brains. Some of them are doing to their brains. And, you know, that's going back. So it wasn't just that Frank did it and his family reiterated that yesterday, but it's the fact that he was early in that process. And of course, 2008, you know, he was able to do a lot of years at that point of radio, of talk radio, of Titans radio, before it really started getting bad for him about 10 years later. So another thing that Chris Nowinski tweeted yesterday, he tweeted the NFL.com obituary of Frank Wycheck. And let me just read Chris's tweet. Quote, "It says a lot that the only thing the NFL.com article cut out of the Wire report of Frank Wycheck's tragic death is the fact that his family wants to support CTE and brain injury research per Frank's wishes." End quote. Now think about that. You know, the NFL, someone at NFL.com said, let's take that out.
Right.
Let's take that out. Let's protect the freaking business. And it speaks to stuff that Gary Bettman has said, which pisses me off too. And it's just, when we get to the point where we're more about protecting the brand, protecting the business, protecting the profits over human beings, this is the crap that we all have to we have to be vocal about and speak out against, because, you know, it's okay to love football. We all love football and want every bit of information about this and find out what is going on. I mean, a few years ago, it was a full-on hysteria in trying to protect football because people were worried about football going away. And I get it. We all love football. But again, let's talk specifically about what some of these people, what is happening to their brains. You want to talk about Dave Duerson. You want to talk about Mike Webster. And if you're trying to be a denier of this, you're trying to whitewash this, to protect the sport, the business, it's absolutely disgusting. And the fact that yesterday the NFL itself decided to take that out of the story is so telling and so disgusting. And it's just, these things cannot just be left unsaid.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did not see that yesterday. So the fact that they left everything else in there and that's what they decided to take out, I think, to your point, is absolutely telling, and it's ridiculous. And look, I understand that the NFL is trying to protect itself, and anytime that people start talking about concussions and CTE, they get nervous over there. I get all that, but there's also like some decency that you need to have in situations like this too. Like, just optically, look at what you're doing here, and now you've got a person who passed away over the weekend who's been dealing with this stuff, and that's what you decide to take out of the Wire story. Like, it's ridiculous. And look, to your point, dating back to 2008 there and what you just referenced, that's before this conversation really was a thing in the NFL. Like, that was the early stages of CTE and concussions really being a conversation in the NFL. And like you said, Frank was pretty outspoken about that towards the latter part of his life there. So kudos to him for being willing to talk about that and being willing to do that even back as far as he did. And, we had Teresa Walker on earlier. If you missed that interview, you could check it out on Robby and Rexrode, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. But she kind of detailed, what it was like the last few years of his career and some conversations that she had with Wycheck, dating back to some stories that she did for the Associated Press where he openly talked about, CTE and being aware of the challenges that were in front of him that way. So Frank, in some ways, kind of a little bit before his time, Joe, in terms of speaking out of the dangers of CTE and that discussion in the NFL.
No question about it. And obviously, a personal experience for him, but he thought of the greater good. He thought of the greater good in other people. And I think that needs to be commended. And look, I mean, when it comes down to it, as he referenced, which Teresa talked about, there are people who are susceptible or more susceptible than others, right? More vulnerable than others. And that's where we aren't there yet with being able to figure that out and being able to basically tell someone if they should play football or not. I mean, that's because some people go through this and they seem to be fine. They obviously don't have the drastic issues that others do. And that's what we've got to figure out.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Corey Curtis from News 2. We'll get his thoughts on the life and legacy of Frank Wycheck. Look ahead to the Titans and Dolphins coming up tonight on Monday Night Football as well. Looking forward to that conversation with Corey coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. And as we do every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our friend Corey Curtis from News 2. Corey, good morning. How are you?
You know, all I can just say is your day just got much better, and I do what I can.
It did. It did. Every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, for some reason, my day just sparkles. It gets better immediately. I haven't been able to figure out why yet.
It's like a Shea Weber slap shot just coming at you.
It did. Yes, it is. No question. So, Corey, obviously just a rough weekend here in our state with the tornadoes that passed through, and then yesterday the announcement of the passing of Frank Wycheck at the age of 52. When you think about Frank Wycheck and your dealings with him over the years, what comes to mind?
He's a pro. I mean, you know, he's a professional football player, professional how he handled himself. You know, guy who helped, you know, kind of reinvent the tight end position a little bit. But a guy who loved this city, loved this organization, loved being a part of it, loved being a part of the community. And then, you know, obviously had his struggles with the concussion issue and the aftermath of it. But, you know, as I talked with several of his former teammates yesterday, you know, the overwhelming thing is the guy was a giant. You know, he was a giant in this organization and a giant in this community. And there's just that this doesn't take that away. It just kind of reinforces it.
Yeah, and then what about even post-career, post-playing career, Corey? I mean, obviously Frank was such a, you just don't. I mean, you see, former players were professional franchise in a particular city, then get into media, have success. But it just seemed like Frank was such a central part of that scene for so long.
Yeah. Well, he was the first one too. I mean, he was the first former player to really kind of immerse himself, and it was the first real opportunity. Now, that group of players, and I was here for that group of players, they connected with the community. And the Titans have good players now who do a lot in the community, but it was different. I mean, these guys were at every golf tournament. They were everywhere at everything, and they connected with people all over the place. I think as they moved to a new city, they knew that was part of the job. And so fans really got to get up close and personal with a lot of these guys on a semi-regular basis. So they were already connected. But then when he sits on the radio every morning, with Mark Howard and Kevin Ingram, and tells it like it is largely, it was the fans' first chance to connect with that. And Frank has a good personality, obviously as well, and naturally progressed into the booth with Mike Keith, for years. And so it was more of, an opportunity to truly connect with one of these guys and make him one of your own. When you're on the radio or you're on TV, people are connected to you and, they talk to you like they know you. And, sometimes it creates awkward situations because you're like, I don't know you, but they know you because they're with you every day. And Frank was with them every day. It wasn't a weekly appearance. It was every morning. I mean, I know that show was a huge show, and Frank Wycheck was a huge part of it.
Yeah, no question about it. Then on the field, Corey, I mean, the Music City Miracle, obviously one of the iconic plays in the history of the National Football League. But even beyond that, I mean, you're talking 505 receptions, 5,126 yards, 28 touchdowns for Frank Wycheck, and as he liked to remind people, a perfect passer rating to go along with that as well. But a heck of a tight end on the field for the Titans. That was, I mean, look, if you watch the Titans play back in the day, you know that he was Steve McNair's favorite target by far.
Well, I mean, he was his security blanket. When he needed a completion, that's certainly where he was going to go for most of the time. And so, and that was, at a time where the tight end position was transitioning. And also remember, we talk about the numbers, 500 to 5,000. That was in an offense that was run-driven.
Yeah.
I mean, really run-driven. And he's another player that played here in Nashville, and that if he plays in Pittsburgh or Dallas or Green Bay, I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer, okay? But his name carries a lot more reverence throughout the rest of the league if he plays in one of those spots, I think, without question.
Corey, what are we going to see tonight in Miami?
Well, we're going to see the fastest team in the NFL, averaging 6.9 yards per play. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
So they're going to get X plays. We haven't seen anything from the Titans that says that they're not going to get X plays. So, we're going to see if Derrick Henry can rush for 200 yards, because that, to me, is their only chance to keep this thing relatively close, is to keep the offense on the field and keep the Dolphins on the sideline. Defensively, when I look at this Dolphins team, and by the way, they've run the ball really well. I mean, nobody talks about that. Mostert and A-Chain are really good, and they're really fast as well. And so they run the ball really well. But defensively, you can't defend all those guys. The guy you can defend is Tua. And if you can take Tua out, you can take out some of those guys. So I think that's their best choice. It's the riskiest choice, but I think it could yield the most results if they can get in his face and take him off of his game. That's the best way, because I don't think you're not going to run with those guys on the outside. That's a nightmare.
Well, and you don't have Christian Fulton or Jeffrey Simmons in this game. I mean, on paper, Corey, this looks like this could be just an absolute annihilation for the Dolphins tonight. And I know it's the NFL, and it's not like it's Chattanooga taking on Alabama in this game tonight, but this does feel like all the makings of a blowout. And it very rarely do you feel that way heading into an NFL game, especially an NFL game that has involved Mike Vrabel over the years.
Well, it's a league that's driven by matchups, right? And you look at certain games, and you just say, yeah, this isn't a particularly good matchup for the Titans because of their speed and their big play capability on the outside. So I agree, it's a scary game. But as we saw this weekend, you never know what's going to happen in this league. I mean, if you saw some of the outcomes coming this weekend that happened, then you're a better person than me. I did not predict 3-0 between Minnesota and the Raiders.
No.
No, for sure. I mean, it is that kind of week. I suppose every NFL weekend there's at least one or two where you're at least somewhat surprised. Really weird, this was a really weird one. One thing that happened, which I'm not that surprised by, because the Lions are paper Lions, but I know. But your Bears, I got to say, this relates to the Titans, because the Titans are up to 6 on the draft order.
Yeah, they are.
And I'm wondering, are the Bears? Is it possible the Bears not only stick with Justin Fields, but with Matt Eberflus if they go on a tear at the end of the year?
On a heater? Yeah, it's funny. Every time the Bears win a game, my Bears friends are like, do you think we can win out? I'm just like, stop it. Stop it. Let's just win one more, okay? Let's just win one more. They've been a pretty bad football team under Matt Eberflus. I'd have to know something about him that I don't know to say next year we're going to move on with him. And the question about Justin Fields isn't a question about Justin Fields to me. It's a question about Caleb Williams. If you think Caleb Williams is Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Tom Brady, Joe Montana, if you think he's one of those guys, it doesn't matter what Justin Fields is. You have to take the generational quarterback. That's what this comes down to. Everybody sees Fields has talent. Can he harness that and turn it into elite NFL quarterback play with better play around him? Obviously, that's kind of what remains to be seen. But again, if you think Caleb Williams is the bee's knees, all right, because when Andrew Luck was drafted, there was number one, there was no question. I feel it's largely the same about Caleb Williams. And if you feel like he's that, then it doesn't really matter what you think of Justin Fields. You've got to take that guy.
Corey, last thing for you here. Who's the best team in the AFC? Dolphins are 9-3. They haven't beaten anybody except for Denver that's above 500. Kansas City is 8-5. They've lost 2 in a row. Buffalo 7-6. The Jags just lost to the Joe Flacco led Browns. Who's the best team in the AFC in your mind?
By the way, they also lost to the Jake Ferguson Bengals.
They did.
Who just beat the Indianapolis Colts as well. The Dolphins are interesting because, like you said, they haven't beaten anybody. And, they're scary. They're super scary, but they haven't beaten anybody. And so that just, it leaves you with your hands kind of up in the air, right now as to, which way this thing goes. And so I don't have a great answer for you. You didn't mention the Baltimore
I guess
Ravens.
it's Baltimore.
Though. Yeah.
They needed a walk-off punt to beat the Rams yesterday. But, yeah.
Yeah, but the Rams are a pretty good football team.
Rams aren't bad.
The Rams are one of the surprising teams in the league. I think Sean McVay's done a hell of a job there this season. They play incredibly hard. They've discovered new weapons in Kyron Williams and what's his name, Puka Nacua on the outside. Yeah, so he's really done a heck of a job there. I guess if I had to wager right now, I would be more willing to trust the Ravens than I would the Dolphins at this point. I've told you guys all season that the Chiefs' weapons weren't good enough, okay? And they have proved it over and over and over again. Their weapons are not good enough, all right? Buffalo is still capable, okay? Buffalo is still capable. And not just because they beat the Chiefs, but because of what they got on their team. And so that remains to kind of be seen. But if I had to pick somebody right now, I'd have to go with Baltimore because of defense, the quarterback, and their coaching is always really spot on.
Well, Corey, really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. Appreciate your perspective on Frank Wycheck as well, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. All right, yeah. This is the fourth now, Rob Baronis and Josh Evans, that we've had to say goodbye to too early. So those are tough days, and I understand if there's a lot of people hurting right now because, like we talked about, he connected with a lot of people. On a lighter note, if you want to order your 2024 Super Bowl champion Chicago Bears shirts, I'll be printing them up with a screenshot later today.
That's good. Make sure you tweet that out. We'll get people directed your way. That'd be good. Thank you, Corey.
All right, later, guys.
All right, Corey Curtis from News 2, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your reaction to what Corey had to say, your thoughts on the passing of Frank Wycheck, your favorite Frank Wycheck memory, your thoughts on Titans-Dolphins on Monday Night Football tonight. All that coming up. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We are live from our 102.5 The Game studio, brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Robby and Rexrode, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you on this Monday morning. Chase and Big Joe down in Miami. They'll be with us at 8:45. They will be covering the Dolphins-Titans game tonight, doing their show from Miami this morning. So a little bit warmer, I would presume, Joe, down in Miami than it is here today when I woke up and it was 25 degrees.
So they've been down there for several days. Is that correct?
I believe they went Friday night.
I believe a lot of
that happened.
Pre-game preparations,
pre-show
really making sure. Yeah, a lot of pre-show meetings, really digging in on this matchup. Huge game.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like covering the Super Bowl. Yeah. Very interesting. I look forward to hearing what are their preparations and the work they've been doing down there.
I do too. Looking forward to that coming up at 8:45. The 4-8 Titans with a massive one tonight as they take on the Miami Dolphins. We'll take your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025. We've been taking your thoughts on Frank Wycheck all show long, passing at the age of 52. That news coming out over the weekend. I got a text on the text line from an unnamed texter. It says, Frank never big-timed anyone. My daughter and your own Nick Fraser went to school with his daughters, and he talked to you like he'd known you forever. He also had a Joe Rexrode Skiatika moment where he mispronounced Molotov cocktail and instead called it a Mazel Tov cocktail. Mark and Kevin could just never let that go. That's pretty awesome. Appreciate that memory there. That's good stuff. A Mazel Tov cocktail.
That is combining Mazel Tov and a Molotov cocktail. That is a very much a Skiatika moment. He also, I know, wasn't it? So this was, when we had Mark on, it was like a Kaharski. Was it Kaharski Wycheck? Like Kaharski said he could outwalk, or was it Howard? It was one or the other, but it was like, even though Wycheck was like obviously an NFL great athlete, like mall walking, I will kick your butt. We'll have to get the story from PK this week, but that was pretty awesome too.
Well, it was awesome. And then of course, we play the hurricane theme every week when PK comes on with us, and that was a Frank Wycheck's decision there. He loved the hurricane theme song, and that was his decision to bring that up when PK comes on the radio, which lives on today here on our program.
Indeed, it does. Yeah, it was. Another thing that just comes to mind about listening to those guys is there were times, and I don't know if others could agree with me on this, but there were Mark Howard and Frank Wycheck actually both kind of sounded alike. Did you agree?
A little bit,
you think so too?
A little bit.
There were times when one of them would say something, and I wasn't sure which one. Well, now if you talk for a bit, then you'll get the difference, but they both sort of had, I don't even know how to describe the voice, but it like there was a similarity there, which also made it, you had to be on your toes.
You did. And it was fun over the summer to get Kevin Ingram in here too, because he talked about some of those days with Mark and Frank and just what was going on there, and just the banter that those guys had. And obviously we've had Mark on the show before as well, and to think about two of the three of those guys being gone is kind of surreal. I mean, it's a tough weekend, and like Corey said, I mean, you think back to those Titans days, Josh Evans, Rob Baronis, Steve McNair, Frank Wycheck, players gone well before their time, and it's kind of as a kid growing up here at that time, I was 7 the first season the Titans were here in 1999 when they were the Tennessee Titans. And to think about like that group of players, I think Corey's absolutely right. And it was a different time, obviously, and social media wasn't around, and so you had to be like really intentional with getting out in the community and putting yourself out there. And the Predators did that too when they came here, but it was just kind of a different time back then. And I do think this city connected to that group in a way that was pretty special. And obviously, look, the on-field success had a lot to do with that too. When you show up and you open up your new stadium, and the first year you go to the Super Bowl, like that's a pretty special thing. So the combination of the on-the-field success and how visible those guys were in the community, I don't know that we'll ever see anything quite like that again here in the city. It's just kind of a unique time.
Yeah. I mean, it was a confluence of things that made it a really special time. I mean, I remember from the living somewhere else, but watching from a far perspective, that 99 season. Well, first of all, just remember Wycheck was a great player.
Yeah.
And I think Corey's right that, in a different market, maybe he more is made of him around the league. But what I remember, like from 99 in particular, was like of course they didn't lose in that stadium. And it was like, holy crap, SEC college football crowds have come to the NFL. Like
Yeah.
This is the best atmosphere. It was kind of like what Seattle a few years ago was, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what people were talking about around the league. Like this is a different level of intensity and sort of like a college football feel in a place where it's always just been college football and not the NFL. And so that was that they were that was one of those teams. I certainly rooted for them. I mean, I rooted for them just as a general NFL fan, especially that year. Certainly in the Super Bowl, but even just all along the whole run, like they were, I think, a very easy team to root for a fan who didn't have a dog in the fight, because it was this new area and they were just a lot of likable guys.
Yeah, then there's everybody's talking about the Music City Miracle today, and obviously Frank had a gigantic role in that play. And we talked about the lateral and the debate of the Bills fans, some of which still to this day don't believe it was a lateral, even though it's been scientifically proven that it was at this point. But this 5-year stretch from Wycheck from 97 all the way to 2001, you had in 97, 63 catches, 748, 70 for 768 the next year, 69 for 641 in 99, and then 70 for 636 in 2000, 60 for 672 in 01. I mean, that's a pretty consistent stretch of, number one, playing in every single game throughout that stretch and being consistently productive in an offense, as Corey pointed out in the last segment, where, I mean, it was a different offense. I mean, they ran the ball all the time. Eddie George had a ton of carries, and it was a running football team. But to be as consistent as he was at that position at that time in that era was pretty special from Frank Wycheck.
Yeah, like if you're I guess of a certain age and you're hearing those numbers and they don't blow you away, like you got to remember, passing numbers, were not nearly what they are now in the NFL. And of course, back then I just mentioned the St. Louis. I just mentioned the St. Louis Rams, that Super Bowl. Now that team with that offense, Mike Martz's offense was, that was one of those with all they had. Like they were putting up ridiculous numbers. But yeah, I mean, McNair during those years is getting 2,200, 2,800 yards. He had a couple low 3,000 yards seasons. I mean, his MVP season of 03, 3,200 yards. So like those numbers for a tight end, that's a big chunk of the passing offense. Today, that's a tight end who has 1,300 yards.
Right. 615-737-1025, our phone number. More of your thoughts on the passing of Frank Wycheck. We'll look ahead to the Titans and Dolphins coming up on Monday Night Football tonight. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The Titans and the Dolphins coming up on Monday Night Football tonight. Taking your thoughts on that, 615-737-1025. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in Cam. Cam, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. So if tonight is just a beat down, there's no way that somebody's head's not going to roll for this. I had a come to Jesus thing over the weekend where I realized that when I debate with my friends now, it's no longer about how good the Titans are or y'all got to watch out for Derek or this, that, and the other. It has literally become the whole conversation is, your team let the Titans score on you, and we're terrible in the red zone. So shows you where your team's at, buddy.
Yep.
And it's wildly uncomfortable, man. And I think tonight is going to be a beatdown. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thanks for the call, Cam. I mean, the line remained at 13.5 over the weekend, Joe, so a 13.5-point favorite. The Dolphins are heading into this game tonight. And as we talked about with Corey Curtis earlier this hour, it is a matchup business in the NFL, and without Christian Fulton and Jeffrey Simmons, especially on the defensive side of the ball for the Titans, it's hard to imagine this matchup going particularly well for the Titans on that side of the ball when you've got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and the way that Miami offense has looked all year long. So we'll see if they can find a way to slow them down. I mean, it is going to have to be the pass rush, right? I mean, it's going to have to be Danico Autry and Arden Key and Harold Landry finding a way to get in the backfield and disrupting Tua. If you can't do that, I mean, you're not going to have a shot in this game.
Right, exactly. It's got to be the pass rush. It's got to be and the running the football. I mean, those two things you might be able to do. Although 98 not being in there makes the first thing a lot tougher. But I think the second part of that certainly is possible, and that's time-consuming drives that end in touchdowns would be helpful. As far as the heads rolling thing, I don't think that there's going to be any more in-season firings. I didn't think there'd be. Yeah, I mean, like the equivalent of like the Ackerman, like his unit and what happened against the Colts. What would be the equivalent of that with like it'd be like the Titans on defense consistently putting 13 players out there or 9 players out there, just like not covering Tyreek Hill at all.
Not covering Tyreek Hill for 6 consecutive plays for a touchdown.
Yeah. I mean, like and then getting someone hurt somehow. Like it's just that was an extreme situation. But as far as I understand what he's saying about the way this team is perceived. I mean, that's the reality of this team in this stretch of football. It's one of the worst teams in the NFL. I do want to throw out real quick, Robby, Kathy, just on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com said it was Mark Howard who told Frank Wycheck that he would, quote, walk you into the ground.
That's right. Yes.
At the mall. Oh, that is beautiful. Yeah, but we'll have to get PK reminiscing on that one Wednesday.
Yeah, no question about that. I remember that story now that Kathy brings that up. Walking you into the ground. I like that. That's good stuff. On the offensive side for the Titans tonight, I mean, it's going to be about Levis. And you look at this Dolphins pass rush, they've been effective all year. That's not good news for a Titans offensive line that is not very good and has been particularly bad, Joe, on the road. I mean, on the road, they've been a very poor unit offensively as a whole, but the offensive line has struggled. And then, Jalen Ramsey coming back midseason for the Dolphins, he's made a big difference in terms of what they're able to do from a coverage standpoint, has made some big plays defensively for them as well. So, while the Dolphins have given up some points this year, this is a little bit of a different group with Jalen Ramsey now in the fold. And if you're the Titans, like you've struggled so much to generate offense on the road really against anybody, and now you're taking on a team in Miami that if things go the way we think they're going to go offensively for the Dolphins tonight, they could make the Titans one-dimensional pretty quickly in this game, which is not a recipe for success.
No, and that's the thing. The Dolphins are – look, on paper – they have the goods, and they are right now. They're like 56% based on the schedule, and this is Austin Mock who does these models for us at The Athletic. But 56% the favorite to get the 1 seed. They're a fascinating team. They need to beat someone good at some point and play well in a game like that. But those corners, that's a really nice thing to have to go with everything else. And David Long Jr. running around making plays, staying healthy. I'm sure he and Henry will have some encounters. Derrick Henry was talking about that last week. What you want if you're the Titans is you want to bring it back old school to when Jalen Ramsey was with the Jaguars, and he very much hated trying to tackle Derrick Henry.
Yes.
You need to get him in some situations like that. But the Titans getting open downfield, I'll tell you what. I guess I'll assume it's going to be the same thing. But like I look at this matchup, and I know I'm going to get ratioed for this. So I guess
know where you're going.
He's my new NWI. But like I feel like Kyle Phillips could help you in a game like this just to move the chains. He and Levis had a pretty good chemistry. Think about what he was doing in the Pittsburgh game. So I don't know everything that's gone on there, but man, it seems like a guy like that could help you. Now go ahead, text line, trash me for loving Kyle Phillips. I'm not saying he's a superstar.
Rexrode is Kyle Phillips jersey ready. Need it here by tomorrow.
I mean, it's like tell me who's out there getting open against those guys tonight. You know, I mean,
it's a great question.
Like DeAndre Hopkins can make some play, but I feel like he could do something for you. And I know that some of the decision was sort of a domino effect with special teams, but we'll see. Maybe he'll be reactivated tonight, just as Tyson Berry was for the Preds last night.
He was. He played in both games over the weekend. How about that? Are we going to see a David Long Jr. revenge tour game tonight? He's been doing one-arm push-ups all week, Joe. We think this is a big one for David Long Jr. tonight?
If you're David Long Jr., you're excited about this, and he obviously was not happy with Mike Vrabel calling him a repeat offender, and Mike Vrabel sort of addressed it this week, and I guess kind of admitted, I don't know that he was sorry, but he was trying to explain why he said it, right?
Yes, but still, sorry is the right word, but yes.
Yeah, it was kind of like, he was just like, oh, he had the same injury. But I'll tell you what, yeah, I'm sure David Long Jr. is jacked up for this game. But if I'm him, I'm like, I still would rather not see a ton of 22, me and him in the hole. It's like, you should be excited for the game, maybe come on a blitz and get the quarterback, get in coverage, give Chig some problems. But like, you still are hoping you've got some friends with you when 22's coming downhill.
It was a weird day, though, yesterday in the NFL. I mean, Joe Flacco taking down the mighty Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence, which, by the way, on that front, like, the fact that Trevor Lawrence was playing in that game after the way his ankle bent the other day is kind of amazing to me, and they called it a high ankle sprain, and that gets us back down this rabbit hole of what exactly is a high ankle sprain. But, he threw.
It's not a high ankle sprain.
I mean, 31-27, Joe Flacco getting it done yesterday, Rexrode. There was a stretch in that game where interceptions kept being thrown on both sides, and like Amari Cooper just dropped the ball, fumbling the ball. It was a weird game yesterday.
Yeah, it was, but the Browns are a lead on D, and Flacco, man, 3-11-3.
Yeah, man.
It's wild to see him.
He didn't have a job earlier this year.
No, and I wouldn't have expected him to have a job. It's really something to see. Some of these, between like the quarterbacks who take forever and all of a sudden they're really good, like your guy, Jordan Love, or like look at like Jake Browning sitting on the shelf and he gets an opportunity and it's like he has the best 3 starts ever for a quarterback in NFL history.
Yeah.
And then people sitting on the shelf. I mean, I guess overall it's like quarterback play is just like there's just a lot more good, at least in spurts, than you'd expect. And then meanwhile, you go to the other side of this, Vikings 3, Raiders nothing, and Josh Dobbs gets benched. And, I had a little interaction with Easton Freeze on Twitter because he was like, I don't have it in front of me. It was like all the Titans fans who were complaining, saying Josh Dobbs should be the Titans starter, that was dumb. And I went to him, I'm like, how many people actually thought that? And I don't know, I'll ask you, Robbie, how many Titans fans were actually like, because look, Josh Dobbs has been a great story, but this is what he is. He's a good backup in the NFL, which is not a bad thing to be, but that's what he is. So how many Titans fans were actually, with the height of his run this year, thinking, God, he should be the Titans starting quarterback?
I think it's more than you're thinking it is.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
All right. Where am I muting?
I just think it's more than you think it is. Hello,
right.
Chase McCabe.
Oh, I was going to say, is Keezer, that sounded like Nick Saban. Is Keezer playing a Saban joke thing, or that's just Chase babbling in the background?
It's just Chase babbling in the background. We'll get to him coming up here in just a few minutes. But the point is, a weird day in the NFL yesterday. I mean, the Bears take down the Lions. Colts get smacked by Jake Browning and the Bengals. We already talked about the Browns-Jags game. Zach Wilson looks like an actual competent NFL quarterback yesterday, and they destroyed the Texans 30-6. So it's been a strange weekend. Maybe that continues tonight, and the Titans can hang in there with Miami.
Yeah, and Bryce Young and the Panthers looked horrific again, by the way, so don't get me wrong here. But I just want to point out, before he got hurt, C.J. Stroud, 10 for 23, 91 yards, a rating of 54.8. Let's not carve out a spot in Canton for him yet. He's been very good. He's going to win Rookie of the Year, but it's early, guys. It's early, and your guy Davis Mills extended himself for a nice 1 for 5 for 4 yards. The Jets really are an incredibly that might be the best defense in the NFL, and they're not going to be in the postseason.
Yeah,
which is sad.
Bryce Young yesterday, 13 of 36, 137 yards, quarterback rating of 48.
Well, CJ, you beat him out, CJ.
Well, we talked about it. Like, a lot of it's not on him, and it's not. But I did see a couple throws yesterday that were just atrocious that he missed, and I'm like, oh boy, it's getting to him.
Well, I mean, I've talked this. We've had that debate like, you don't want to ruin Will Levis, right? Can you ruin a quarterback? And to me, it's like, if you got the goods, it'll come out eventually. But man, Bryce Young could have used a redshirt year, or at least not, or at least the idea of, maybe we should give him a receiver or something before we play him. So I hope he doesn't get ruined by this.
By the way, the Broncos 24-7, they win yesterday against the Chargers. Don't look now. Denver's 7-6, man. Chiefs are 8-5 after their loss to Buffalo. Sean Payton got those Broncos coached up. Russell Wilson looks good. Almost called him Russell Westbrook.
Kind of a similar thing. Couldn't complete a pass, couldn't hit a shot. But, he looks good. It's an amazing comeback for them. 6 teams in the AFC have a 7-6 record between the 6 and 12, from the Steelers, Colts, Texans, Broncos, Bengals, Bills, and Chargers.
It's wild.
Or wait, no, Bills, 6. I just listed 7 teams, not the Chargers.
Chargers
6 to 11. That is 6 teams. Steelers, Colts, Texans, Broncos, Bengals, Bills. And I tell you what, the Broncos, that's wild. That's a race. I'm watching the Bills yesterday. I still think they could get to the Super Bowl. I do. They may not get to the playoffs, but I still think they could get to the Super Bowl.
Let's just have somebody else other than the head coach doing the motivational tactics while they get there.
Yeah, my goodness. Yeah, and that was in 2019. And look, to be fair to him, he apologized shortly after that. So that was one of those stories that, was dormant until Tyler Dunn found it for this big story he did. Just sad to see all these Bills slappies going after him like it was just a tack piece. I mean, he had a ton of people in this story who spoke on behalf of Sean McDermott. It's a fair thing to ask the question of his leadership and what he's doing. And there were some people quoted in there who don't think much of him, but he wrote a balanced story.
Joe, that's going to do it for you today. We'll see you back tomorrow at 6 a.m.
Yeah, I got to get some blood withdrawn. I want you to make sure you ask Harold and Kumar if they found a White Castle in Miami.
I will.
I'll be listening. Thanks.
I will do that. Jason, Big Joe coming up live from Miami next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Nick Keyser here with you live from our 102.5 The Game studio, brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Chase McCabe, Big Joe Dubin, somewhere where it looks much warmer than it is where it was here it was 25 degrees when I woke up this morning. That was fun. Chase, Big Joe, good morning. How are you? What's the weather like down there in Miami?
Oh, good morning, Robbie. Thank you so much for having us. It's sunny. It's a little, I'm not going to say chilly because I'm going to sound like a jerk when you're talking about 25-degree weather, but it's like 62, 63.
Oh, boy.
We're on the 9th floor here at the Lowe's Coral Gables. We're by the pool. So it's very nice.
Sounds tough down there.
I hope, in all seriousness, it is. But in all seriousness, I hope everybody is doing well back in Nashville. Obviously, we've been thinking about everybody and praying, the Hendersonville, Gallatin area, Clarksville that got hit the other night. And so I know you got family in Hendersonville. Hope they're all well.
Yep.
But certainly thoughts and prayers back home.
Yep, no question about that. And obviously, in addition to that, guys, Frank Wycheck passing away over the weekend at the age of 52. And Big Joe, I know you've spent a lot of time around Frank Wycheck. When you think about him as a Titan and the legacy that he leaves behind, what comes to mind when you think about Frank Wycheck and his career, both playing career and his post-career in the media here in Nashville as well?
What's funny, Robbie, is that we, Chase and I a few weeks ago, were talking about Hall of Fame because Eddie George made the final 25.
I think we may have lost Big Joe there for a second. We'll try to get Big Joe back in there. But Chase, just the Frank
do you got him?
Is he back?
He should be.
I think he's muted. We do not have him. But we do have Chase.
Hang on. Well, I'm here. Oh, I see what happened.
Live radio.
You should have him now.
There we go.
Am
He's
I back?
He's back.
I'm back. Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I said a while ago, Chase and I had a discussion about Frank Wycheck. I thought he should be at least nominated for the Hall of Fame for what he did in the tight end position back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now it's been more people have added catches and touchdowns, all that. But when Frank was there from the Oilers / Titans from 95 to 03, Robbie, he was just fantastic. And then we all knew Frank very well off the field, and it's devastating. I mean, it's talking to some of his ex-teammates, and they're just grief-stricken over this. So he's got a great memory for us, remembering what he did when the team moved here and the way he played and all that, and the Music City Miracle and everything that goes on with it. But it'll be it's a tough loss, Robbie.
Yeah, no question about that. So Monday Night Football tonight for the Titans and the Dolphins. Chase, tell us what your day is going to look like here as you guys prepare to cover the game tonight for Miami.
Yeah, we're excited about it, and to be here, like I said, at the Lowe's Coral Gables, for having us. That's kind of our setup, for the day. We'll head over to Hard Rock Stadium probably around 4:00. It's an 8:00 Eastern kickoff thereabouts. So, but we want to get there early and kind of check things out and watch the guys go through warm-ups. I am very excited to see Tyreek Hill live and in person tonight. I saw him when he was with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but I feel like he's gone to another level since then. So that's going to be certainly interesting. But our day is doing the show and then just kind of a little, low-key time getting ready for the game tonight. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you guys there. Looking forward to the coverage coming up all day long and interested to see if the Titans can hang in there. You don't see a 13.5-point line in the NFL too often, but that's what that Miami offense has done to people so far this year. So going to be interested to see what
Robbie,
that looks like.
The sports page of the Miami Herald, the main story is about David Long Jr.
Oh, boy.
Basically going out for revenge tonight against the Titans. I mean, a huge article, and the players talk about how well he's fitting with his defense, how he's put the defense to another level, and it's personal tonight for David Long Jr.
And, I would imagine some meetings between him and Derrick Henry in the middle of the field tonight. We'll see what that looks like, but the repeat offender comments from Vrabel last year on David Long Jr., maybe some one-arm push-ups that David Long Jr. has done all this week preparing for his revenge tour game against the Titans. Going to be interesting to see.
Maybe giving David Long Jr. the football at the 1 yard line to score and just kind of rub it in Vrabel's face tonight.
That could happen. We'll see what happens. Well, guys, looking forward to the coverage, looking forward to the show coming up here in just a few minutes, and thanks for being on with me to close out the show today.
Yeah, where'd Joe go? Get some blood drawn?
Blood drawn. We'll see.
Hope he's okay.
I hope he is too. We'll see what happens on that front. That's going to do it for us today here on Robby and Rexrode. Really appreciate everybody weighing in throughout the show. A lot of memories of Frank Wycheck. As we talked about to begin the show today, thoughts and prayers with everybody affected by the tornadoes over the weekend through Hendersonville and Clarksville and Madison, Springfield, that area where the tornadoes went through this weekend. As we talked about, as more information becomes available on how you can help, we'll certainly pass that along here on Robby and Rexrode. If you're in the Hendersonville area and you need somewhere to go today, check out Long Hollow Church. They're going to be open all day long for your chance to charge some things up. I know power has been an issue over there as well, so check that out. We'll be back 6 a.m. tomorrow. Chasing Big Joe coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.